Level 1, Neophyte. The stone floor of the Fortress of Hera pulls heat from your bare feet, and somewhere below you, in the armory you are not yet permitted to enter, bolters cycle in the dark. You are not a space marine. You are a candidate, stripped of your former name, carrying a body that has already begun to betray the person it used to be. The os modula, the first of 19 gene seed organs that will reshape you over years, is already working on your bones. The ache of it is constant. You do not complain because there is no one here who would receive a complaint as anything other than data confirming you should be removed. The scout sergeant has not told you his name. You call him Sergeant, and he calls you nothing yet, which is its own kind of answer about where you stand. He watches your first live-fire scouting operation from somewhere you cannot locate. No power armor, a sniper rifle, a camo cloak, and orders to observe the enemy position and return without being seen. You are seen, not by the enemy. By your own error, a displaced stone, a silhouette held a breath too long against a ridge. Nothing fires at you. But the sergeant already knows when you return, the way he always seems to know, and the debrief is precise and quiet and worse than shouting. A neophyte from your intake does not appear at morning training. You are told only that his gene seed was recovered. You are told this as though it is comfort. The hypno-conditioning sessions come every third night. Tactical doctrine is pressed into your mind during hours you will never fully remember. You wake from them knowing things you did not know before and feeling slightly less like yourself, which you will eventually understand is the point. The sergeant tells you that surviving one operation means only that you are eligible to be tested properly. The armor, he says, is not yours yet. He does not say when it will be. Level 2, Battle Brother. The power armor seals around you for the first time with a sound like atmosphere locking into a hull breach, and the smell inside the ceramite is machine oil and old iron, and something underneath both that you will never find a word for. The black carapace fused to your spine 6 weeks ago. The armor connects to it directly. You feel the suit's joints as extensions of your own, which should feel extraordinary, and instead feels like remembering something you never learned. You are a battle brother of the 10th Company's successor role, assigned now to a reserve company, and the first thing the assignment teaches you is that the chapter does not place new battle brothers in the spearhead. The tactical sergeant who runs your squad does not explain his decisions. He announces outcomes, and the space between the decision and the outcome is where you are expected to learn everything. You watch him position the squad during a holding action on a contested world, and you see the Codex Astartes working through him the way weather works through terrain, not imposed, but native. Guilliman's sons do not flinch. He says it once, flatly, when the brother beside you hesitates at a breach. Not as inspiration, as correction. You hold a tactically obvious flanking opportunity in your head for 11 seconds during the same engagement. The Codex Doctrine for your company's assigned role does not permit it. The sergeant does not look conflicted when the moment closes. You file that away alongside everything else. You rotate through 3 reserve companies across 5 years, Devastator work, fire support, rear line clearance operations that keep campaigns from collapsing and earn no record entries that mean anything in the chapter's hierarchy of distinction. At the end of the 5th year, the sergeant enters a single notation in the company record, recommending you for battle company assessment. No elaboration, no praise. You read it once. You do not read it again. Level 3, Battle Brother, 2nd Company. Macraga's sky is a blue so pale it reads almost white at altitude, and standing on the deployment tier of the Fortress of Hera with a battle company around you for the first time, the scale of the place lands differently than it did as a scout looking up at it from below. The battle companies are the chapter's operational core. Combined arms, full flexibility, the formation the Codex Astartes was written around. You are part of the 2nd Company now, and the distinction between being trained to be an Ultramarine and actually being one in the fullest operational sense settles over you somewhere between the first briefing and the first deployment, not as pride exactly, but as pressure. A veteran brother in your squad has a combat record that spans decades. He treats you with an evenness that contains no warmth and no contempt, which you understand quickly means your performance will be measured against his without accommodation. He does not say this. He does not have to. The campaign against the Chaos Warband is urban clearance across a hive city the enemy has had months to prepare. The Codex templates were written for open engagements in fortified positions. They were not written for this particular stairwell, this particular ambush, this particular split-second decision at a breach point where waiting for doctrine costs you the objective and acting outside it costs you 2 brothers. The after-action review dissects that decision in front of the full company. The captain records the outcome as tactically sound. He records the losses in the same document. Both entries sit in the same file, without contradiction, and you understand that the chapter will not resolve that tension for you. The captain begins including you in pre-mission briefings slightly earlier than protocol requires. He does not acknowledge this, neither do you. Level 4 Sergeant. The first time a battle brother in your squad waits for your answer with his whole body still, you understand that the weight you now carry is not the pauldron markings, but what they represent to everyone below them. You have command of a 10-man squad. Their war gear, their positioning, their tactical deployment, the chapter's assessment of their performance, yours. The Codex Astartes shifts in your hands from a constraint you navigated around to a precision tool, and the difference between those two relationships is the difference between being led by a doctrine and leading with one. The campaign against the Tyranid Splinter Fleet tests that distinction immediately. The enemy does not respond to standard engagement templates, and somewhere around the third day of a corridor engagement that the briefing materials did not anticipate, you adapt mid-battle in a way that technically deviates from the assigned tactical framework. It works. The after-action report you file afterward describes every decision with language precise enough that deviation is never the word used, and no one uses it in the review either, which tells you something about how the chapter reads results versus methods. A battle brother under your command is killed by an order you gave. The order was sound, the outcome was not. You write the apothecarian notification in the chapter's required language, which has no space in its structure for the thing you feel while writing it, and you file it, and you move to the next brief. The captain recommends you for veteran status assessment. The recommendation uses the word leadership, which, in a chapter that measures everything and decorates language sparingly, means more than the sentence it sits in. You read it the way you once read the sergeant's notation that moved you to battle company assessment. Then you prepare the next deployment, because the company does not pause while you decide what a word means. Level 5, Veteran Sergeant, 1st Company. Terminator armor does not seal the way a standard suit seals. It settles, plate by ancient plate, the servos engaging like something geological finding rest, and the smell inside the tactical dreadnought armor is centuries old and belongs to men whose names are on the Wall of Honor. The 1st Company is the chapter's elite, deployed only when the campaign demands the best available. Every brother around you has forgotten more battles than you have fought, and they do not say this, but you feel it in the geometry of how they occupy a room. Your captain has commanded this company longer than some campaigns last, and his authority is not imposed but gravitational. The boarding action comes via teleportation into a Chaos Cruiser in the Void, the least forgiving operational environment the chapter deploys into, and you hold 3 veterans in close formation through corridors built to disorient, while the ship's systems fight everything your armor is doing. The assault succeeds. 3 veterans do not return. Combined, their service spans more years than you have been alive. Gene seed recovered. Names added to the wall. You write nothing about it in any record because the chapter has a language for loss and you are not yet fluent enough in it to say what you actually want to say. Gilliman's sons do not flinch. You say it to yourself in the silence after, not as the sergeant once said it, as correction from outside, but as instruction from inside, the kind you reach for when there is nothing structural left to hold on to. You notice the difference between those 2 versions of the same phrase. You do not examine the difference yet. A librarian who survived the boarding action speaks with you in the debriefing corridor afterward. He does not talk about the battle. He talks about a decision you made during it. He uses the word leadership the same way the captain once did. You are beginning to understand what the chapter means when it repeats that word. Level 6, Lieutenant. The briefing room in the Fortress of Hera is cold, and the hololith of contested ground throws pale light across the faces of men who are deciding, without showing that they are deciding, whether your read of the terrain matches theirs. You are a lieutenant now. The rank was reintroduced into chapter structure following the Primarch's return and the reorganization of the Indomitus Crusade, a command layer between captain and sergeant designed to hold the operational coherence of half a company when the scale of a campaign exceeds what one officer can hold alone. You are responsible for that coherence. It is a different weight than squad command, wider, less immediate, harder to grip. The campaign that goes wrong at the planning level. The intelligence was incorrect. The enemy had anticipated the disposition of forces before deployment began. You identified the flaw before the operation launched and raised it through the correct channels and were overruled, and then executed the flawed plan and salvaged what could be salvaged. The after-action report contains 2 facts in the same paragraph. Your foresight was noted and the losses were extensive. The chapter does not resolve that paragraph. You begin to understand that the Codex exists partly because individual judgment, even correct judgment, is not sufficient at scale, and that this understanding does not make the losses smaller, it makes them structural. The captain is retired to honored status when a wound taken 3 campaigns ago finally reaches the conclusion his body could not prevent. His gene seed is recovered. Command of the company passes through the correct channels. Your name is in those channels now. Not as an announcement. As a question, the chapter is already answering by watching what you do next, the way it has always answered questions about its officers through accumulated record rather than declaration. You prepare the next operation. Level 7 Captain. The company banner moves into its first engagement under your authority, and the sound of 200 boots on deployment ramps in the dark is the loudest thing you have ever been responsible for. You command a battle company, full authority. Operational decisions made before review rather than after permission. The Codex Astartes is no longer a document above you. It is a document you now argue with in writing when operational experience contradicts its templates, and those arguments are entered into the chapter's living record, where future captains will have to read them and decide what they mean. Ultramar's eastern reaches are threatened. Not a single world, the realm itself, and the campaign to hold it, draws your company into engagements the briefing materials struggle to anticipate. You make a command decision that costs the company heavily, holds the strategic position, and requires you to stand before the chapter master afterward and account for every step in the sequence that produced the outcome. The chapter master listens without interruption. He asks one question, you answer it. He nods once, and the review closes. Command at this level is a particular kind of solitude. The sergeants see a captain, the company sees a banner. You see the full accounting, every casualty and every engagement under your name, a list that will not stop growing while you hold this rank. You carry it the way the armor carries its own weight, so thoroughly integrated that to remove it would leave you less than yourself. The chapter master summons you when the campaign closes, not for an accounting, a conversation. The difference between those two things is a warning you recognize immediately. You say nothing about recognizing it, you report as ordered. Level 8, Chapter Master. The strategium at first light shows every active theater across Ultramar and the wider segmentum as cold light on a hololith, and the silence of a room where every decision is final and no voice above yours will review it is the loudest silence you have ever stood in. You command 1,000 Astartes, you govern Ultramar's military defense in the Primarch's operational absence. The Codex Astartes is now a document that your decisions will eventually be folded into, annotated by your successors the way you once annotated the decisions of the men who held this position before you. Robert Guilliman himself has reviewed your appointment. To stand before the Primarch is not to stand before a superior officer. It is to stand before the original version of everything the chapter was built to be, and the distance between that ideal and the institution you now command is a measurement only. The chapter master is positioned close enough to take accurately. A campaign in the Eastern Reaches requires a decision the Codex does not cover. A tactical alliance of temporary necessity that could preserve Ultramar's position at the cost of a doctrinal precedent that will be in the chapter's record permanently. You make the call, it holds. You write the account yourself in language precise enough that future chapter masters will be able to read it and make their own determination. Alone in the strategium afterward, you ask yourself the question you have carried since a boarding corridor in the void. Guilliman's sons do not flinch. You no longer know if that is the chapter's greatest strength or the last thing the Legion built to stand where feeling used to be. You do not record this question anywhere. It has no place in the chapter's language, and you have served long enough to understand which things belong to the record and which things belong only to the silence of this room. Below, in the lower tiers of the Fortress of Hera, a new intake of aspirants stands on cold stone floors in the dark. Their bones have already started to change. Somewhere beneath them, in the armory they are not yet permitted to enter, bolters cycle in the dark. They know your name. They do not know what it costs.